Welcome to Restaurant Deal Making Exposed, the only show that equips you with everything you need to know about restaurant transactions. In this show, we tell you all about how to make the sale or purchase of your restaurant not just possible, but successful. Now here are your hosts, ex-restaurateurs and seasoned brokers, Patrick Toda and Andy Mirabel.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Restaurant Deal Making Exposed. I am Andy, partner Patrick here, and we have the wonderful guest today, Thomas Judt. I'm going to give you a little background about him. This episode, a little tongue-in-cheek that I'm going to call it the one-stop coffee shop. It's really going to be a start-to-finish story of, Thomas, his background, and how he created a concept, built it, opened it, closed it, and sold it. So let me give you a little background here. Today, we're going to discuss the creation of a coffee concept, from its conception to locating the ideal space, the design and build out, concepts to grow the business and maintain goodwill, and the eventual sale of the business. We're very happy to have our guest Thomas Judt with us today. Thomas is not only a past client, but has become a trusted friend and resource for myself and other clients, given his diverse background and experience. Thomas is a true modern Renaissance man. I was introduced to Thomas before he ever opened his own coffee and pastry shop. Thomas is a jack of all trades, given he was a trained classic chef. He is a contractor, a creative, an entrepreneur, and heavily involved with his local East Bay community where he lives. Thomas owns his own general contracting business in California called Thomas Judt Builders, Inc., which is currently specializing in ADU and tiny homes. But he has touched most facets of the contracting industry, including restaurant and kitchen design, which was integral in how he designed and built his own coffee shop called The Line Coffee. He has always had a itch to create his own coffee brand and open a brick and mortar in the Bay Area. Thomas and I spoke from time to time, and he let me know he intended to open his own shop, build the brand, and at some point, hopefully sell it. This story didn't seem too far off of many of my other aspiring clients and business owners, but Thomas set himself apart in many ways in how he operated and how he used his unique knowledge with contracting, dealing with the city and county permitting process, and ultimately the philosophy on how he wanted to operate and grow his own coffee shop. So let's get to it. I'm going to let Patrick say hi to Thomas. They just met, but I go way back with Thomas, so you can dive in there, Patrick.
Nice to meet you, Thomas. I guess I found out a little fact, maybe. Is it true that you were a chef for Mike Myers during the So I Married an Axe Murderer filming?
Say what? Where did you guys find that? Holy smoke.
That's like one of my favorite movies.
Do you got like connections in the NSA or something? Man, I never tell anybody that story anymore. Oh my God. Yeah. So I went to the California Culinary Academy, no longer in existence. It became Cordon Bleu. I guess Cordon Bleu purchased it years ago. There was a little lawsuit about false advertising. And then I think in general, culinary schools have fallen out of favor, or they have on the West Coast. They used to be chock-a-block, and we just don't have them as much anymore, which is it's a little sad for our industry, a little shame for our industry. But yeah, so I was going to culinary school, and after I graduated, my buddy and I, we split to Europe. We went for a month, took a car, smallest wheels, drove around, had a blast. Came back, and one of my teachers, she goes, "Hey, do you have a job yet?" I said, "No." So, well, there's this movie in town, and a movie star needs a private chef. Are you up for it? I'm like, yeah, I still need to eat and make money. So yeah. So I did. I went and I was a private chef for Mike Myers on So I Married an Axe Murderer. Funny. The guy is just brilliant. But first off, right, just, high IQ numbers. And it's just extremely funny. And I had a great time. Yeah, I had a weird experience. I thought it's a very self-focused business, and it has to be, because there are a lot of talented people. They're spending a lot of money. They're risking a lot of money. So I thought, wow, this is different than my world, but it's a good story. Yeah.
Cool. So how did you go from that to opening a coffee shop?
The long way.
In my life, at the beginning of my life, on the day that I was born. Okay, so it was a sunny May morning when my mother birthed me. It kind of is a long shot. So going to culinary school, I think every person, I don't know, Patrick, are you a cook? Is that your connection to the restaurant business, or?
I've never been classically trained. I grew up in a delicatessen and family businesses most of my life. And then I went on to work with Starbucks and Jamba Juice and more of a corporate background, and then got back and bought my own restaurants later on. So more breakfast, lunch, and catering than like dinner service. And I've never been a chef, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's all real. I've never called myself a chef. I'm just a cook. Culinary school is just learning the basics. It's just concentrated, and that for me, that's the best way to learn. But I think that everybody who's ever gone to culinary school, and most people that work the line, dream of the day they want to own their own place. So mine was none different. One of the classes that we had in culinary school was business. It was 2 weeks, but it was intense. It was 35 hours each week, so 70 hours of putting together a business plan, talking about the relationships of the numbers, looking at that whole back end aspect that you really don't see when you're, on the saute station on a Saturday night and you're running out of prep. So I really took to that. That seemed to make sense to me. And one of the key lessons, one of my big takeaways was the fact that your fixed costs have such a big influence over your operating costs, and you need to get to a certain volume before those fixed costs become a decreasing proportion of your overall P&L. So I looked at and having restaurant experience, I had been managing restaurants for a few years before that. Was keenly aware of labor costs and food costs and how those dynamic costs have played into it. I wanted to also be conservative when I opened a place. So I picked something small. I picked a small size concept. So in culinary school, it's like, okay, it seems to me that the best way just to start to build a brand and get going is to have a smaller place with not too much labor. You can, play with the prices. You can play with your menu. You're a lot more flexible and sort of meet the market. And so I think it was there during culinary school. It was like, yeah, I think I really want to do this someday.
That's pretty amazing. We've seen a large shift over the past 5-6 years that, small, quick service, lower overhead is key, especially in California where costs are so high. You pointed out fixed costs. And for our listeners, that's an example. An example of fixed cost is rent, for example. Your rent is fixed each month. You know it's coming. Controllables are food and labor, things like this. But a lot of our clients and a lot of concepts are moving to smaller spaces, right? So you can control these costs better and know what's coming. So it's a smart move. And you sounded way ahead of your time in that regard and in that path, Thomas.
Well, it's just I'm lazy. Maybe I shouldn't say it. It turned out not to be the case. Both of you know, and those people who are listening who've been in any management position know the challenges of managing labor and doing that and making it productive. And the culture in our industry has changed certainly over in the last 40 years that I've been involved with it. I think I've seen 3 or 4 different iterations and then where we are now. And that is always the biggest challenge and that the biggest variable. And the thing that I disliked the most was having to cover shifts, when people just invariably didn't show up. You got to call or beg people to come in, and then you got to, kind of get them to produce. And yeah. So I wanted to have a concept where that was controllable and I didn't have that fluctuation so much.
That makes sense. I've already pointed out that you're a contractor and own your own contracting business, and you've dabbled in a lot of different areas of that industry, from home to commercial, restaurant, and so on. And I've connected you and with some clients who want some direction and help with permitting or layout and kitchen and stuff. So what did you see as some of the largest challenges that you went through in locating the right space and then moving through the permitting, zoning, and design of the space?
I grew up in the restaurant industry, so in my 20s, in the 1980s. And it was the heyday of us boomers. We were all going out and drinking lots of wine, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, even Sunday night, all big nights. And I get a little tired of being up late past midnight and going to bed, driving home, usually a couple drinks. I loved the lifestyle. I just wasn't loving that part of it. So I told myself and back up to say that as I would walk through downtown areas or business areas during the week when I had time off, I would see these flourishing businesses that were open Monday to Friday. They opened at 11 and they closed at 3 or 4, and they were making bank. And I'm like, man, that's the job I want. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. I could have a regular life and I could have this lifestyle too. That was the first touchstone. It's like I wanted a place where for me it was a daytime job. It was a regular job. So I started looking in areas that had business. And so the Line Coffee is currently held by another owner on Telegraph Avenue near Ashby in Berkeley. And it's just a block away from Alta Bates Hospital. It's across the street from a Whole Foods. There are a number of different professional office buildings up and down. University's a mile away. And it's also in a neighborhood that is somewhat affluent. So there's some discretionary income for things like coffee and baked goods like that. So when I found it, it was bare wall. They call it a warm shell. So it had drywall on it and some plumbing, but that was about it, some electrical. So we had to redo the electrical.
Was the intent from the building owner or the original builder of the building, was the intent to have some sort of food use in there? Or was it this warm shell you speak of? Could it have been retail or anything else?
Yeah, it could have been anything else, but I think the prior iterations there was a cupcake place that didn't quite make it. And then there was like a burrito taco place that they had a commissary kitchen and they dropped off. And then the pandemic sort of closed them down. But yeah, it was super small. It's under like 400 square feet. I mean, it's tiny, to do. And so I was looking for a place. And I was not afraid of it being just a warm shell, and not having afraid of doing it. Because as a contractor, I could do all that and it was affordable to me. And I realized that I would have to bear, the cost of improvements. As it turned out, we were in a pandemic and the landlord, I got lucky. This is the lucky. So those of you who listen, this is actually the lucky part of what happened to me. I found a landlord that was motivated. They liked me enough. I had to sell myself. I had to put together a business plan. I had to talk to him more than a couple times. They had to get comfortable with the idea that I knew what I was doing. So that's a big part of being prepared when you're finding a place and you're going to talk to a landlord, is to have a clear concept of what it is you're doing and have a thorough knowledge of the product and who your demographic is and how you're going to approach it. So I had to do some pitching and selling, but they offered to do the tenant improvements for me, which were the plumbing and the electric basically. It wasn't a lot because I had purchased standalone equipment. So I had stainless steel tables, I had refrigerating cabinets on wheels, my refrigerators, all that stuff except for the dish sinks were bolted, those were bolted down, but everything else could easily be moved in and out. So I didn't have to go into, custom millwork and have cabinetry built or anything special like that. I just literally went to the Webstaurant webpage and started clicking on the things that I wanted and had them delivered. So to answer the question about the biggest challenge, so finding it was understanding the market that I wanted to serve and the type of cuisine, but I guess the type of hospitality, type of service I wanted, which was a workday service, which was a daytime service servicing business people. So I had to look for locations like that and ones that I could afford and ones that I could afford to improve, ones that fit the ideal of a small concept where I could control labor and fixed costs and that type of thing. And so, yeah, that was the thing. So to answer the challenging part of building it out, there is a philosophy behind that, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, I think, is that I developed the 7 Ks to success in the coffee business. And those 7 Ks are, I'll go over them quickly, we'll talk about them again, but I want to get to number 5 to expand on this point. So the first one is to be kind. Whenever anybody comes in, we're all having a hard day, just be kind. The next thing is to have a clean environment, just cleanliness. I hate it when a business opens up and they're sparkling and you come back 6-8 months later and there's dust all over the place. Quality, the best quality product we can afford to sell at the price point. Consistency, try to always maintain that level of quality no matter what. Number 5 is quick. And here's the tag here. And this is actually, I was thinking about it, this is probably the most important one. And we can circle around more in the end about the whole philosophy of why I pick these 7 things that I do. But the Specialty Coffee Association of America did a study a couple of years ago, and they found that 51% of customers coming in just wanted to go in and out, get a cup of coffee. The other 49% wanted an experience. And so their recommendation was designing a place that optimized for quick serve and yet still allowed for that engagement and that experience that comes with it, which follows then with number 6 was a curated environment. So creating an environment for utility for people coming in and out, but then to curate it so that there was an experience when people came in. Biggest pain point for coffee customers is the wait in line before they order. It's not so much the wait for the coffee. I mean, I want to order my coffee. I want to get out of there. But waiting in line to order is the biggest pain point. So you try to make the place interesting. You try to set it up in a certain way. And then if your line is moving quickly, that's not a problem. And then the last one is community and building community. So some of
the stats you shared with me about the growth in the public response and ratings and all the things that you got so quickly really show that you put a lot of weight on your values, and especially number 7. It was pretty interesting to see how quickly that you were embraced.
I also chose a product which is the
number 1 drug in America.
Thank you. It is. It's actually the number 1 most legally traded drug in the world, which is caffeine.
I worked at Starbucks, so I used to watch people come in it would be like, 6 a.m. They get their cup of coffee, they go to the station, start doing their little mix with the right amount of cocoa and the right amount of nutmeg and cinnamon. And it was like every morning was exactly the same. So I was like, wow, this is quite something. And you can never do anything wrong at a coffee shop because they just love you so much when you're handing over that cup of espresso or coffee.
You make their day. I became a legal drug dealer. So you guys both know this, and I'll say this for those who are listening and learning. There's different clientele. There's different types of business. When I worked in the 80s, it was a dinner house. We were like a destination restaurant. You made reservations, you put on a suit and tie, you came and there was a tablecloth and you planned on being there. With a coffee shop, you become a neighborhood place where you become part of the routine. At the end, I had a pup wall of fame where we had a cork board, and then the young person who worked for me had a little Polaroid camera, and we'd take pictures of the dogs that came in. I have a dog, very dog friendly, put a big dog bowl outside. We give dog treats to the dogs that came in. I'm no fool. I know how to market. The dogs will lead people in for coffee. So
I can one up you on this, Thomas. I had Yappy Hour on my patio every Monday.
Oh, you win. That's
and
great.
We made our own organic biscuits in-house. So
Wow.
That's cool. I would have sworn that there were maybe 6 or 8 dogs that came in, that brought their owners in. They come in, you give them a biscuit, you chat with the owner or whatever. It turns out that, but before I left, we only did this a couple months. There was over 60 dogs that were coming in on a regular basis. And they literally, story after story, is the dogs would literally hit the corner and start pulling their owners into the coffee shop. So, you drug the owners, you drug the dogs, you do whatever it is to make them happy. Here's a classic throwback here. I'll share this one out there and let's see what's that. So when I was in culinary school, we had one of our teachers was the former valet to the president of France. And he told us this one thing that made a lot of sense. And I was waiting tables at the time. He said that when a family comes in for dinner, you don't need to fawn over the husband. What you need to do is take care of the wife and the children. Make sure they're well taken care of. Make sure they're happy. Because his job is to take care of them. And for that little bit of time, you're taking care of his family. And that gives him a little break. And so that was sort of the focus of service to do that. And so that was just kind of that was one of the things I brought along, never really thought about. But, they've got their dogs, you take care of the dogs, you take care of their kids whenever they come, just make everybody feel.
The kids especially was one thing when I had my own restaurant, really focusing on them. The parents' eyes would light up and they would just be, they'd feel comfortable there and then they could have their own conversation too. And it's a really important fact you just brought up.
I remember one time I was serving somebody and this mother or the kids were fussing or whatever, and her dinner was getting cold. And I stood there, it's just like you started talking to the kids and getting their attention. And she was just like shoveling it in. She was just trying to she's got like a 15-second break. She's going to get as much food in before she's got to go back to mom mode. But helping people with their chores in life, I think is probably the best gift we can give each other no matter what.
How did you get your team on board to have this vision and hiring them and getting them to kind of buy into this 7 rules and message and, service like you're talking about right now?
That's a really big question, even though it sounds simple. I mean, there's a corporate approach that we've all experienced to doing that with repetition, the indoctrination, the quizzing, the repetition again, and that works. But I think it's probably the first example we all learned is just leadership by example. And certainly, I've voiced, the 7 things. I say, look, these are my values. This is me on any given day. When you're listen to me or watching me, or you're working beside me, know that these 7 things are going through my mind. And I think I just heard this statistic. This is an interesting one. So there was I don't know what the other 5 are, but of the 6 things that managers and employees listed as most important toward the retention of the employee, number 6 on the manager's list was the ability to make a contribution to the work effort, to actually have your work recognized. And it was number 1 on the employees. We just want to be worked on. I'm a little bit of a micromanager. I put this concept together. This has been my dream for 20 years. I wanted to do this coffee shop. And I think the biggest thing is I had to let go of that. I had to lean back on those 7 Ks and look, this is as far into this process as I can put myself. I can just remind these people, and I only tried to hire kind people. Everything else, you can pretty much train them. But it's just like, look, we just want to be kind. We want to be clean. Those are the things we're going to focus on. We're going to try and do the best quality of product. We just want to do it the same way. We want to be quick. We want to keep the place organized and looking good. So when people come in, it's interesting. And then we want to build relationships. And at that point, other than a little coaching on how to steam milk or, conversing on a recipe, I honestly had more success when I just shut up.
That was a hard thing to do at some point in my career as owning restaurants or, managing them or whatever it may be. I think it took me well into my 30s where I had to trust the initial training, trust leading by example, and trust my staff.
Yeah.
And if you're always nitpicking and pointing and you got to, micromanaging too much, it really backfires. Yeah. What, we've kind of sold you here to our listeners, Thomas, is kind of a one-stop shop. I mean, with your contracting background, chefing background, and all of this, maybe you can help, let us know what kind of professionals you surrounded yourself during the opening process, during your ownership. And then, of course, I'm self-plugging here, but, you and I worked together on selling your business at one point. But how important is it, to surround yourself with, like-minded professionals or folks that can help you at various junctures of this birth of the business and then eventual sale of it?
I'm stricken with the disease that I think I can do everything. And I can tell you right now, Andy, there is no way I could have worked this last year of my business or sold it without your being on the other end of the phone. So I'm involved in politics here in the city where I'm at. I'm on the board of directors for the Park and Recreation Department. And it's a really interesting situation. It's a horizontal power structure. So not one of us can influence the direction of, we can influence, but we can't make an overt direction as to how staff should do anything. It requires a majority of the board to do. It's really weird. So that one thing has caused me to rethink how I work with people. But to your point exactly, you need to have good people and you need to have educated people and you need to have motivated people in your life. I think we look at why people really want to send their children to Harvard. Harvard has a fine education. We can get that we can get that Berkeley, at Stanford, we can get that at all smaller colleges around the world. And the thing about Harvard is they focus on networking, building those relationships. And then that's exactly right. And I felt so fortunate having met you a couple of years ago, and then knowing that you were there when my health wasn't doing great, and I needed a partner to do this. I needed somebody to carry that water for me, and you were there doing it. So having somebody, I'm fortunate to have studied architecture. I'm fortunate to have been a builder. I'm fortunate to know, how to wire things and plumb things, and and how to roast chicken, and steam milk. I'm
Hopefully
fortunate.
You wash your hands between the plumbing and the chicken cooking. I'm hoping. But
Sorry, what? Yes, cleanliness first.
Yes,
That's
cleanliness.
That's second. Now be kind, Andy.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, it's true, but I am a hands-on guy. I like to tell people that I enter the world through my hands. The physical world makes sense to me. And so when we're talking about managing employees or seeking partners, honestly, that's not first nature for me. And I don't think it's second nature. It's just taking a better part of my life and failing, really falling down, failing to realize that I don't want to do it alone. I can't do it alone. It's not any fun to do it alone. And that there's so much more to do, but it's that micromanaging thing, that wanting to control, and I guess the wanting to be relevant or prove myself. So maybe if there's one little takeaway from this too, is when you want to go own your own business, it's great. It will be your business, but you got to kind of give it away. You got to step back. You got to set the values. You got to know what you're doing. You got to know the numbers. You got to know your product. You got to know your demographic. You got to know how to manage your facility as well. You got to know the laws. You have to know it. But then you have to step back and let other people fail for you so that they can be better.
That's exactly true. I mean, I think one of the things I learned when I went to the corporate world, coming from family businesses, is just that, is trusting my staff and being able to delegate and not taking ownership of everything and being stressed out all the time. It took me a little while to figure that out. But once I did and I started to trust my staff, I think a whole new world was born with myself. And that's when I knew I can probably take on ownership of a restaurant, stuff like that. So I think you're absolutely right.
To tie a couple points that Thomas has brought up about why he landed on this location and how he set it up, I think I wanted to dive a little more in detail, just let our listeners know this was it 400 square feet, Thomas? Is that what it was roughly?
Yeah, roughly 450 square feet with the bathroom. Yeah.
The efficiency and function in which you designed your space that did not have a hood, and you put out high quality pastries and warming, savory pastries. And, it was just lovely what you offered. And of course, the coffee was fantastic. And then you are, for example, when you're standing at the front there and making the coffee, you're merely 36 inches away from me having a conversation, and it felt warm and inviting. So, I really do think you held true to your 7 mantras there for running a business. It's such a great concept, and it just was lovely. So if you don't mind, can you go through that list of 7 just so we can listen one more time to it? I know you kind of went on a tangent on it earlier about 0.5, so I wanted to hear the list.
No, I will. And there's just some thoughts I've had about number 5, and that really sort of, I think, drive home the reason. And I didn't really put that together until just this week. But the 7 Ks for success in the coffee business. And if nothing else, I'm illiterate. So kind. You have to be kind. Our lives are so stressful. We all have our own weights and burdens. Probably one of the few joys in life is to come in and have a morning cup of coffee to sort of set the world right. And when it gets busy, and it always gets busy, when we all sort of, start to freak out, is the most important time just to remember to be kind to that. And so that was always first and foremost. When everything else is failing, when the place is burning down, when the refrigeration stops refrigerating, when the bus opens its door right in front of yours and everybody gets off, and, you're 8 orders behind before 7 orders are in, you just have to be kind. That's the only thing left. The next one is clean. And as I said before, I love it to go in a brand new place and it's super clean and everything's crisp and you can see the edges on everything, and there's a little glow and there's a little shadow and the lighting works. And then you come back 6 months later and there's dust in the cracks or crumbs, and the credit card machine's grimy, and, the espresso machine hasn't been wiped down. It's disheartening.
I'm glad you weren't on my tour this morning of a back of house tour at a restaurant this morning, and you would have fainted.
I will bring steam cleaner.
Yes. Okay. All right. Sorry. Number 3.
So number 3 then is quality. Now, my point is to do the highest quality that you can afford to sell. Where I got this from is the 3 rules of business. The first rule of business is always improve quality. Never cut costs. Always try to improve the quality of your service or your product or whatever you're doing. Always improve the quality. 2, always market, always sell, always get your message out there, always focus on your demographic. And then 3, there are no other rules. Those are really only the 2 things you have to do in business. So from that, I took away quality. It says, I have to hit a certain price point in order to get cash flowing. I'm going to have to be a little bit below market. I'm going to have to be efficient in what I do, but I still want to put out a superior product. I want people to go, wow, I want to go back there. So quality was always that was the number 3 after kindness and cleanliness. Now we're going to work on what we're doing is quality. And then consistency. You can have those flashes of, wow, we have this is a great dish on Friday night, and then come back on Sunday and it's entirely something different. So working on consistency, which is the bugaboo for everyone in the restaurant business. Always try to do it. Always set up systems. Always try to make things easy. Always try to work to remove decision points so that things are just done. So it's easy to repeat what it is you're doing. Again, 5 is quick. So again, the study from the Specialty Coffee Association of America, they said 51% of the people just want to get in and out and get their coffee. And the first place they recommended was in the design, the flow of the business. And so mine was a little shotgun kind of place. The counter was right up front. The espresso machine, like Andy said, was right next to the counter so you could talk to people. But you walked in, the first thing you saw was a pastry case. You looked to the left, there was the cashier who put in your order. You stepped to the side, and a couple minutes later, you had your hot whatever, and your drink was made on the counter, and you walked out. I knew it would work well, but I was actually amazed at how well that worked, and it worked very well. The next one was to curate the environment, which made I wanted to be interesting looking. I didn't want it just to be shabby chic. I didn't just want to pick up stuff at the thrift store and put in there and look, I have a little kitchen. Come have a coffee in my hippie Berkeley kitchen was not the look I wanted. So I actually put design intent into it. I looked at the basic elements of design, which are stone and metal and wood. And then I used high contrast colors. I used stainless steel and black and white for the walls. And then I had splashes of color up, and I'd have my books, or I'd have my coffee pots, or I'd have different artwork. to splash color. And so I used the basic elements of design to make sure that it was aesthetically pleasing, even though it was minimalist in nature. I didn't have a lot of things up. It wasn't super busy, but it felt comfortable. And good design always feels comfortable when you walk in. And then the last thing was to build community. And that's, starting by telling stories and listening to people's stories and, debating things. I used to always like to get in debates with people who would want to have a debate with me, or sometimes I'd have people come in and they'd have to tell them, they would share with me the thing that wasn't going that well today. And that was a real honor and a privilege.
Doesn't that conflict with rule number 5 about speed? Did you just ever go down a rabbit hole and ticket times just doubled all of a sudden?
Yeah. I mean, there were people that were sort of tip-tapping their toes.
Sure.
And that's the experience that the other 49% wanted. So you design the environment so people are comfortable. You make it quick for the 51%, and then you try to provide for the 49%. And so I was working on developing a clientele, and so I needed to build that community. I probably weighed heavily on the experience, but I knew these people had to get back and forth to work. So we started doing online ordering so they could order ahead and they'd come and go. And there'd still be time to chat and catch up once the relationship started. But here's the thing about number 5 that I thought about lately. And this is, I think, where all of us could spend time thinking. I follow a gentleman called Rory Sutherland. He's the CEO of their marketing firm in England. And he follows behavioral science, but he talks about logic versus psychologic. And in straight economics, we optimize utility, the most utility for the least amount of resources spent. That's the logical approach. And the psychological approach is to maximize well-being for the least amount of resources spent, which dovetails with a definition I heard about service versus hospitality. Service is getting a hot plate to your customer as quickly as possible. That's good service. Good hospitality is how they feel when they leave, how they feel they've been treated. The utility, the logical approach is to get them the product as quickly as the highest quality as soon as possible so they can be on their way. Hospitality is that sense of well-being. It's that thing that's greater, whether I'm serving a cookie or a filet mignon or a cup of coffee or a snifter of cognac. All that's the utility. It's that experience that goes with it and managing that experience. So in order to be successful in a restaurant, you have to be everything. You have to you want a little bit of everything. I won't make a joke about it. And anybody can do it if they know what their values are, if they really feel they want to treat people well and share what they can do. Then, I think restaurants are a great entry point. Coffee shops are a great entry point for people.
So for all our listeners out there that may be a young entrepreneur or even a veteran one trying to move into another area of the industry or whatnot, I mean, Thomas has just shared such a great wealth of his own knowledge and his philosophies. And I think it's so relevant and so valuable. So, I mean, thank you, Thomas. I mean, this has been like listening to my Alan Watts podcast for a while.
It's a master class on how to, it really is. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you. We got to ask you a bonus question here, right, Patrick?
Yeah, I think so. Right. I want to know. Go ahead.
You got to ask him about how I killed an axe murderer earlier. So my turn. No.
For those of you who didn't hear that, yes. I killed an axe murderer.
Yes. So think back and let us know about your most memorable or favorite dining experience. And it doesn't need to be a restaurant, just something that really stands out in your mind.
Oh my God, this is a great story for me. For those of you who can't see, I'm sort of choking on this. I'm laughing so hard because this is my favorite story to tell because I've had some crazy good meals. I'm so happy that we have a number of starred restaurants in the Bay Area that we can drop in and try. And I love all the different cuisines of foods and the detail to attention. And I got to eat at the Jules Verne restaurant in the Eiffel Tower. There are places that I've been that I've enjoyed some amazing food, but here's the story. So I told you, right after I graduated culinary school, my buddy and I, we took off. We rented a little car and we drove around Europe. And we landed in Switzerland, drove into Germany, saw the castles, had some Wurstens and, mustard and sausage and bread. And we drove in over the Alps into Italy and went to Venice and Verona. And we were cruising down and I wanted to go to Parma. Because I was like, how do they make, Parmesan cheese? How do they do these things? And so we drove into Parma and this was back and it was 91, 92. My buddy had a travel guide, and he said, here's the thing. It's going to cost us a couple more dollars, but there's a little tourist place right outside of town. You stop there, and they'll call ahead and book a hotel. They'll find a room for you. I'm like, oh, perfect. I don't speak any language. Let's just do that. So that was the thing. We'd always been successful until we got to Parma. And the person there said, yeah, I'm really sorry. There's a convention in town, and there's nothing around. And there may be one place in town, but it's siesta time now. You can go try. So we found this place in town, knocked on the door. Yeah, sorry, nothing. And they said, try this place over there. We went over there, knocked on the door. No, you got to try this place out of town. We went, knocked on the door, nothing. So we're finally, we're more than 5 miles out of town, and it's late in the afternoon, and it's super hot, and no air conditioning in this car, and we're getting grumpy. And they're like, let's just head for France to Montagne on the Riviera. We'll get as far as we can, and then we'll get there in the morning. So we head out, and we're driving along, and we had stayed in these little pensiones, little hostels. They were inexpensive. We were on a budget, and we passed by this really nice hotel. It was like literally, you drove through this little town. There was like 6 buildings, a gas station. One of them was a big hotel. We drove by it, and there was nothing ahead of us. My buddy goes, you know what? Let's go back. I'll pay for the hotel. I just don't want to drive anymore. So we stop at this hotel. We go back, stop at those, get a room. It's got a proper shower. Everything's nice. I was like, I get a shower first. So I jumped in the shower, and I came out, told my buddy, hey, take a shower. We'll go find some food, And he goes, well, I went and walked around while you were taking your shower, and I walked across the street, and there was a little gelateria there. And he said, okay. He says, and downstairs at the hotel, they had a restaurant, but it 1 or 2 people, and it looked kind of weird. And then down the street a little bit is a trattoria. It's just a little door front, a storefront, very small. And I said, well, let's go there. I'll wait for you. And he goes, I'm tired. I'm just going to shower and stay here. Bring me something back. So I go downstairs, and it's kind of creepy. There's a couple of guys there, but it's like it's made for a banquet. And, it's like, nah, I'm not comfortable. Like, I'll just go get some gelato. And then I walked across the street. But you know how that sort of smell of an ice cream shop comes out at you a little bit? My stomach was a little turning. It's like, that's too rich. That's not what I want. So I went down a few doors, and I saw the little trattoria, and there was nobody in it. It was only a couple tables. And I tried the door, and it opened, and I closed it again. I was a little scared because there was no sign. I'm like, well, I guess it's open. So I opened, and I went in, and I hear these little flip-flops from the back coming. Flip, flop, flip. And there's this short little woman dressed in gingham with an apron wrapped around her. And I asked her, my worst Spanish, Italian, Berto, you open? She would say, for dinner. And so she sat me down, and she goes, vino? I said, yeah, see, they're nice. She said, Branco or Rosa? I said, Branco, white. So she brings out this little glass. I know you can't find this anywhere. It had to be local. This little glass of sparkling white wine, just lightly sparkling. And it was so refreshing. I was like, oh my God, this is wonderful. So I'm sipping this, and she brings out, and you get ensalada. See, a salad. So she brings out a salad. I have never, ever seen tomatoes this red or lettuce this green anywhere. And had, of course, a little Italian vinaigrette on it. And I'm like, I'm not a vegetable person, but I can't eat that in the wine. And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. And then she goes, you want carne? And I'm like, yeah, I'll take carne. So she brings out this thin sliced pork, and it's got this really salty au jus on it. And I'm just I'm drooling while I'm eating it. It's just like, oh my God, it's amazing. And she goes, you want dessert? And I'm like, no, that was great. That was fine. So I get up to pay my bill. I had forgotten about my buddy. And I said, oh, he wanted me to bring something back. So right next to where I was paying out was one of those little reach-in freezers. And they had these little crocs. They were actually crocs with gelato in it. So I grabbed him one of those. As a friend.
What a good friend. And then you told him you had the best meal of your life to date.
I went back to tell him the exact same story. Yes, Andy, that's exactly what I did. And it had one of those little, has one of those little spoons that looks like your thumb or whatever on it, the flat things. He was angry eating that gelato.
Oh boy.
Well, I was telling him the story. And our friendship never recovered, honestly.
Yeah. I wouldn't forgive you either. That's funny. Yeah. I think one of the stories I told previously of one of my best experiences with an old mother in Italy and coming out and, this handmade meal, it just made me melt. So I can relate. So, well, thank you, Thomas. We really appreciate having you on here and sharing your experiences, some fun stories and other things. And we want to let our listeners know to check us out for our next episode. We got some more exciting guests coming up and other subjects that we're going to tackle that we hope you will find useful. And thank you for joining us.
I appreciate it. I'm going to leave your listeners with one last bit of thing. Don't be afraid. Do it. If not now, when? Do it. If you want to you want to do it now. Yeah. And you may fail. Okay. Then do it again. But do it.
If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to worry about missing an episode, you can follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you found today's episode interesting or useful, please share it with someone you think would benefit and consider leaving a rating and review.
Reviews help restaurant owners or buyers just like you discover this podcast and benefit from the important topics covered in the episodes. Your opinion matters to us as a listener, so feel free to leave topic suggestions and feedback for us, as we will use these to tailor the episodes to you and help you get the most out of listening.
Thank you all for listening to this week's episode of Restaurant Deal Making Exposed. If you're considering selling your business and would like a free consultation, reach out to Patrick and Andy at therestaurantsalesbroker.com or visit www.therestaurantsalesbroker.com to learn more.